Some people believe rules don't apply to them and dismiss every warning as unnecessary. Usually, this arrogance leads to nothing worse than embarrassment, but sometimes that deadly combination of entitlement and recklessness creates consequences no amount of complaining can undo. It was March 18, 2015. The loading bay of an industrial warehouse in central Ohio hummed with its usual midday rhythm. Overhead, fluorescents cast harsh light across concrete floors marked with faded yellow pedestrian lanes. The air smelled of diesel exhaust and cardboard dust. Forklifts moved in practiced patterns, their reverse alarms chirping in steady intervals. Pallets stacked with metal components, each weighing close to 2,000 pounds, waited near the shipping dock. Leah Manning was 44 years old. She worked as a logistics coordinator, a desk role that involved routing shipments and managing inventory reports. She had no certification to operate floor equipment. Colleagues described her as confrontational and entitled, someone who believed her office position gave her authority over floor operations. She routinely dismissed safety protocols, arguing that warehouse rules didn't apply to management staff. That afternoon, she was tracking down a discrepancy in a pallet count. The loading bay was busy. 3 forklifts were in motion, repositioning pallets for an outbound truck. Security cameras mounted on the ceiling recorded the standard flow of operations. Operators wore high-visibility vests and followed protocol, checking mirrors and blind spots before maneuvering. Leah entered the bay from the office corridor. She moved aggressively across the floor, ignoring the painted pedestrian lanes entirely. A forklift operator was repositioning a pallet of steel brackets near a support column. The load, elevated on the forks, blocked the operator's rear view entirely. The machine began reversing. Its alarm sounded. Leah stepped directly into the path, positioning herself between the reversing forklift and the column. When the operator gestured for her to move, Leah waved dismissively and planted herself more firmly in position. She shouted that she worked there and knew what she was doing. The forklift moved backward approximately 1 to 2 feet. The operator felt the engine load abruptly and heard a dull impact resonate through the chassis. He stopped immediately. The rear counterweight, a solid block of cast iron weighing over 1,000 pounds, had pinned Leah against the steel column. The force compressed her pelvis, fracturing the pelvic ring and rupturing the pelvic vasculature. Leah let out a brief, involuntary gasp and remained upright as shock began to set in. Her expression shifted, confusion replacing defiance. For several seconds, she stayed on her feet, awareness fading in waves. Her knees buckled when operator immediately neutralized the forklift, set the brake, and dismounted, reaching for his radio. Leah collapsed onto the concrete. Blood pooled rapidly beneath her. She remained dimly conscious for several more seconds, her breathing shallow and erratic, before the catastrophic hemorrhage pulled her under completely. The operator radioed for help, his voice shaking slightly. Other workers rushed over, but did not move her. Emergency services were called at 1:47 p.m. Paramedics arrived within 9 minutes. No pulse or signs of life were detected. She was pronounced dead at 2:03 p.m. Investigators reviewed footage from multiple security cameras positioned throughout the bay. The combined angles showed Leah bypassing safety protocols, confronting the operator, and refusing to move when warned. The reverse alarm was clearly audible. The operator had followed standard procedures. No mechanical failure was found. The footage was not released to the public at the family's request and due to its graphic nature. The county medical examiner listed the cause of death as blunt force trauma with pelvic crush injury and internal bleeding. No criminal charges were filed. The warehouse resumed operations the following day. It was July 9th, 2016. The public boat ramp on the western shore of a recreational lake in southern Missouri was packed by late morning. The concrete incline descended at a moderate grade into murky water that smelled faintly of algae and gasoline. Temperatures had climbed into the low 90s. Humidity made the air feel heavier. Vehicles towing boat trailers formed a slow-moving line that stretched back into the gravel parking area. Engines idled, radios played through open windows. Families unloaded coolers and life jackets while waiting for their turn. The ramp itself was slick in places from water and moss. Tara King was 38 years old. She worked part-time as an assistant in a small real estate office, handling paperwork and scheduling showings. Friends described her as outspoken and quick to react when she felt slighted. She had driven to the lake that morning with her teenage son to launch a borrowed fishing boat. The wait had stretched past 20 minutes. Tara grew visibly frustrated. Her SUV was third in line. A pickup truck with a large aluminum boat trailer sat directly ahead. The driver had stalled twice while attempting to back down the ramp. Tara put her vehicle in park and stepped out. Her phone remained mounted on the dashboard, live streaming to a social media account she used occasionally. The camera captured the interior of the SUV and part of the ramp through the windshield. She walked forward, moving between her vehicle and the pickup. Other drivers watched from their cars. The concrete was wet and uneven. Tara approached the driver's side of the pickup, gesturing with one hand. Her voice carried over the ambient noise, but words were indistinct. The pickup driver, attempting to reposition the trailer, released the brake. The vehicle began rolling backward down the incline. The trailer followed. Tara was standing slightly to the left of the truck bed, near the rear axle of the trailer. She turned as the trailer moved. The hitch assembly struck her at knee height. The impact knocked her sideways onto the wet concrete. She fell onto her back. The trailer continued rolling. One trailer tire passed over her upper right thigh. The combined weight, roughly 1,800 pounds, crushed the leg against the concrete. The femur fractured under compression. Bone fragments tore through the femoral artery and surrounding vessels. Blood began pooling beneath her as a rapidly expanding hematoma formed in the thigh. External bleeding followed. The trailer rolled another foot before the driver reapplied the brake. Tara did not move. Her breathing became shallow and rapid. Bystanders began shouting. Two men ran toward her. One attempted to apply pressure using a towel from his vehicle. The bleeding was difficult to control. Tara's eyes closed. She lost consciousness within roughly 30 to 60 seconds. Someone dialed emergency services. The call was logged shortly before noon. Paramedics arrived within 12 minutes. They found Tara unresponsive with no detectable pulse. Resuscitation efforts were initiated, but the extent of blood loss made recovery impossible. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The live stream on her phone continued recording audio and the aftermath until a bystander reached into the SUV and ended the broadcast. Investigators reviewed the footage and interviewed witnesses and was immediately removed from the internet due to high graphic imagery. The pickup driver stated he had not seen her approach and had been focused on aligning the trailer. No evidence of intentional action was found. The county medical examiner determined the cause of death to be traumatic femoral artery rupture with rapid exsanguination secondary to crush injury and femoral fracture. The death was ruled accidental. No charges were filed. The ramp reopened later that afternoon. It was October 2nd, 2017. The residential construction site sat on the outskirts of a developing subdivision in central Arizona. The afternoon sun beat down on exposed dirt and gravel. Framing for a two-story home stood partially complete, with wooden studs rising against a cloudless sky. Extension ladders leaned against the structure. Orange warning tape stretched across the driveway entrance. The ground was uneven, covered in loose gravel, scattered lumber, and electrical wire. Workers moved between tasks across the lot. Hallie Bates was 52 years old. She worked as a freelance property inspector, contracted by buyers to assess homes before purchase. Colleagues described her as thorough but impatient, often cutting corners to finish jobs quickly. That afternoon, she had arrived without notifying the construction crew. She was not authorized to be there. The property was weeks from completion. Hallie had been hired to inspect a neighboring home, but decided to examine this unfinished structure as well. She carried a clipboard and a digital camera. Hallie ducked under the warning tape and walked onto the site. A worker in a hard hat approached her, explaining that the site was restricted and asking if Hallie had clearance. Hallie barely looked up, dismissing the concern with a wave. She informed the worker that she was a licensed inspector and didn't require permission. The worker mentioned safety protocols. Hallie cut him off, stating that she knew construction sites better than most workers. She moved toward the rear, where a 24-foot aluminum extension ladder rested against the second-floor framing. The ladder sat on loose gravel with no stabilizing base or tie-off. Another worker called out, warning that the ladder hadn't been properly secured. Hallie ignored the shout entirely. Positioning herself at the base, she tested the ladder briefly, then began climbing. The ladder swayed as she ascended. She reached approximately 18 feet. The base shifted laterally. The gravel offered no traction. Hallie's weight caused the ladder to slide. She leaned backward instinctively, trying to regain balance. The ladder continued moving. Hallie fell. Her body rotated as she dropped 18 feet. Her upper back and neck struck the sharp edge of the poured concrete foundation. The impact fractured her cervical spine, severing critical neural pathways. The force caused her head to strike the ground. She landed on her back in the gravel. Her arms and legs did not move. Her eyes remained open but unfocused. Two workers saw the fall and ran toward her. One shouted for someone to call emergency services. The other knelt beside Hallie but did not move her. Blood pooled beneath her head. Her breathing became rapid and irregular, short gasps that grew weaker. Within 30 seconds, the agonal respiration ceased. One worker panicked and attempted compressions before pulling back, realizing the extent of the trauma. The compressions had no effect. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes. Paramedics found no pulse or respiratory effort. Her pupils were fixed and dilated. They pronounced her dead at the scene. The ladder remained where it had fallen. Investigators documented the site. They noted the absence of ladder stabilization and a loose gravel surface. Workers confirmed Hallie had entered without permission, dismissed safety warnings, and refused to follow protocols. The medical examiner listed the cause of death as high cervical fracture with spinal cord transection and secondary traumatic brain injury. The death was ruled accidental. No criminal charges were filed. The construction company paused work for 2 days while safety protocols were reviewed. It was May 14th, 2018. The Community Recreation Center in Central Florida sat quietly under midday heat. Temperatures had reached 88 degrees by noon. The outdoor pool area was cordoned off with orange barricades and multiple warning signs. The pool had been closed since the previous evening due to a filtration system malfunction. Water had been partially drained for repairs, leaving the depth uneven and unsafe. What was normally an 8-foot deep end now held approximately 3 feet of murky water. The shallow end was nearly empty, exposing stained concrete. Security cameras mounted on the building's exterior recorded the entrance area, but not the pool basin itself. Liza Perry was 61 years old. She worked part-time at a local retail store and visited the recreation center several times each week. Staff knew her as a regular swimmer who preferred early afternoon sessions. Friends described her as stubborn and dismissive of rules she considered inconvenient. That day, she had arrived at her usual time, unaware of the closure. When she found the pool area blocked, she grew visibly frustrated. Other patrons had turned away. Liza did not. She approached the barricade near the main entrance. The signs clearly stated the pool was closed for maintenance. No staff members were visible. Liza placed her towel and bag on a nearby bench. She wore a one-piece swimsuit and swim cap. She gripped the barricade and climbed over, stepping onto the pool deck. The water level was not immediately obvious. Overhead, sun created glare across the surface, and the water had taken on a clouded, greenish tint from stagnant sediment. To someone familiar with the pool, the visual cues that should have signaled danger were obscured. The murky color masked the true depth. Her brain expected what had always been there. Liza walked to the edge of the deep end, where she typically entered. She did not pause to check the depth. She raised her arms above her head and dove forward in a clean arc. Her body entered the water head first. The dive was executed with practiced form. Her hands broke the surface, followed by her head and torso. Within a fraction of a second, her head struck the concrete floor. The impact was direct and forceful. Her cervical vertebrae fractured at multiple levels. The spinal cord sustained a catastrophic high cervical injury. All voluntary movement below her neck ceased instantly. Her body went limp. She remained face down in the shallow water, unable to lift her head or move her arms. With her respiratory muscles paralyzed, shallow reflex gasps occurred briefly before breathing failed. Unable to cough or turn, water entered her airway. Within seconds, drowning was complete. The pool area remained empty. No one had witnessed the dive. Liza's body remained motionless, partially submerged. A staff member conducting a routine check noticed the displaced barricade approximately 20 minutes later. He walked onto the pool deck and saw the body in the water. He radioed for help and entered the pool. Another staff member assisted in pulling Liza onto the deck. Her skin was pale and cool. They began CPR immediately. No pulse was detected. Emergency responders arrived within 7 minutes. Paramedics continued resuscitation efforts, but found no signs of life. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators reviewed security footage. The video showed Liza climbing the barricade and walking to the pool edge. The camera angle was fixed on the entrance and did not capture the pool basin, so the dive was not recorded. The county medical examiner determined the cause of death to be cervical spine fracture with secondary drowning. The death was ruled accidental. No charges were filed. The recreation center reopened the pool 5 days later. It was August 21st, 2016. The suburban rail station in northern Illinois was crowded on a late weeknight. The platform stretched approximately 300 feet along the tracks, lit by overhead fluorescent fixtures. A service delay had been announced 20 minutes earlier, causing passengers to cluster near the benches. Audible announcements echoed through mounted speakers, warning of an inbound train. Rhea Cole was 47 years old. She worked as a rideshare driver, spending most evenings navigating the city and suburbs. Friends described her as someone who believed rules were suggestions for other people. Earlier that evening, she had approached the station attendant, demanding to know why the delay wasn't being fixed faster. When told that mechanical issues required time to resolve safely, Rhea had gestured dismissively and muttered about incompetent transit workers. That night, she had parked near the station to pick up a fare. The passenger had texted that they were waiting on the opposite platform. Rhea stood near the edge of the southbound platform, looking across the tracks. The overpass would require walking the length of the platform, climbing stairs, crossing, and descending on the other side. She checked her phone. The fare was waiting. The announcement system repeated its warning. An inbound train was approaching on the northbound track. Rhea glanced toward the sound, but saw no headlight yet. She stepped off the platform onto the ballast, the loose stones crunching under her shoes. Several passengers noticed her. A woman near the platform edge called out a warning. Rhea looked back and made a dismissive hand gesture. An older man pointed toward the approaching train and shouted more urgently. Rhea shook her head and continued walking, her posture suggesting she found their panic overblown. She crossed the first rail and continued toward the opposite platform. The train's headlight became visible around the curve. The horn sounded, a long, sustained blast. Rhea quickened her pace, but maintained her confident stride, as though the warning was meant for someone else. She reached the far rail and placed one hand on the edge of the northbound platform. The train was traveling at a speed estimated between 40 and 50 miles per hour. Rhea attempted to pull herself up. Her foot slipped on the loose ballast. She lost her grip. The corner of the train's cab and pilot struck her along the right shoulder and upper torso. The impact deflected her body violently sideways, imparting rotational force that sent her tumbling. Multiple ribs fractured. Her clavicle was shattered. She was thrown clear of the tracks, her body striking the ballast and rolling several feet before coming to rest. The train's emergency brakes engaged. Passengers on both platforms began shouting. Several dialed emergency services. 2 men climbed down and approached Rhea's body. She was lying on her side, motionless. Blood pooled beneath her. Her eyes were closed. No breathing was visible. Emergency responders arrived within 6 minutes. Paramedics confirmed massive blunt force trauma. The injuries were unsurvivable. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The train operator provided a statement to transit police, confirming the horn had been sounded and emergency braking initiated immediately. Investigators reviewed footage from station cameras and passenger videos. The recording showed Rhea dismissing multiple warnings before stepping onto the tracks, despite the audible warning and visible train approach. The county medical examiner listed the cause of death as multiple blunt force injuries sustained in a train strike. The death was ruled accidental due to trespassing on active rail property. Service resumed approximately 3 hours later. It was December 3rd, 2017. The apartment complex in suburban Colorado sat on a hillside overlooking a parking lot and landscaped courtyard. Evening temperatures had dropped to the low 30s. A light dusting of snow covered the ground, but had melted on the balconies, exposed to the afternoon sun. The third-floor unit hosted a small gathering for a friend's promotion celebration. Mina Frost was 34 years old, a marketing consultant known for her demanding personality and need to be the center of attention. She had arrived fashionably late, immediately complaining about the cold and asking why they couldn't have met somewhere warmer. She wore an expensive sweater and designer jeans, constantly adjusting her outfit for photos. Within minutes of arriving, she was already critiquing the apartment's decor and suggesting how the party could have been better organized. The balcony extended roughly 8 feet from the sliding glass door, enclosed by a metal railing painted dark green. Earlier in the evening, another guest had noticed the railing flex slightly when someone leaned against it and mentioned it to the group. Several people decided to stay inside after hearing this, but Mina overheard the conversation and immediately scoffed. She dismissed the concern with a dramatic wave of her hand, calling everyone paranoid and overly dramatic. She insisted the railing was perfectly fine and that people were being ridiculous. She wanted the perfect Instagram shot with the courtyard view in the background, and nothing was going to stop her from getting it. When her friend suggested taking photos inside instead, Mina rolled her eyes and declared that she knew what she was doing. Mina stepped onto the balcony despite multiple warnings, positioning herself for photos. She demanded that others come out to take multiple shots from different angles, becoming increasingly irritated when people hesitated. When someone again mentioned the railing concern, she snapped that she wasn't going to let paranoid people ruin her photos. She had paid good money for this outfit and wasn't about to waste it on boring indoor shots. She began posing against the railing, completely ignoring the slight movement others had warned about. When a guest suggested she step away from the edge, Mina became hostile, telling them to mind their own business. She leaned backward against the railing, insisting this was the best angle and that she knew how to pose better than anyone there. The metal gave slightly, but Mina ignored it, focused entirely on getting her perfect shot. She adjusted her position, placing both hands on the top rail behind her, putting her full weight against the structure while demanding more photos. Even as the railing creaked ominously, she refused to move, calling the sounds normal. The corroded anchor bolts, weakened by years of moisture and freeze-thaw cycles, began shearing sequentially under the sustained pressure. The first bolt failed, then the second, causing the railing section to tilt suddenly outward. Mina felt the movement, but was too committed to her pose. The remaining bolts gave way, and the railing section detached completely. Mina fell with it, dropping 22 feet to the concrete walkway below. She struck the concrete torso first, the impact compressing her chest cavity. Milliseconds later, her head made contact with the walkway, resulting in severe cranial trauma. The combined injuries were immediately fatal. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but could only confirm what witnesses already knew. The subsequent building inspection revealed the anchor bolts had been corroded for years, with routine maintenance neglected. Multiple guests reported having warned Mina about the railing's instability. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.